Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Q&A Cafe for ByDesign. It's Wednesday, May 13th. Today we have interactive forums with Laura Hercalo. Just letting you know, I'm going to be recording this session, so it will go out to all attendees and those who didn't make it, I think about 2 days after this session. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat or the questions box, and we'll get to them after the presentation portion of the session. Next week, Wednesday, May 20th, we have Q&A Cafe. It's a mouthful: monitoring enterprise performance, creation of KPIs, so key performance indicators in ByDesign. So without further ado, I'll leave it on to Laura.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. As Kayla mentioned, I'm Laura Hercalo, and I think I did last week. So, and whatever last week's was where I didn't have the screen up right, hopefully today the screen is correct from the get-go. So today we're going to talk a little bit about interactive forms, how to set them up, how to use them, and then I'm going to show you just a live demo of a couple of different things. So again, the agenda is just what's an interactive form. You may or may not have known these little gems are in ByDesign, or you might be using them today. Walking through the scoping and the setup, and then again, just showing you a quick live demo of the iForm in action. So overall, what's an interactive form? An interactive form is an output form, so much like your sales order confirmation, the invoice, the purchase order that you send to an external party, and it's generated in the course of a transaction, so just like your standard output. But what's different about it is that it has some fill-in fields on it, which allow your end recipient to update. And then when they send it back in, it'll make certain updates within Business ByDesign. So I use the best example of the iForm in action, and really the most beneficial from my perspective is using it in the purchasing process. I talk to a lot of customers that their suppliers can't do or can't receive EDI. They're maybe not as sophisticated as they would like them to be. They get into a process where they're emailing spreadsheets back and forth to get order confirmations, and it's a very tedious process for the purchasing team and the buyers and the supply chain managers to make constant updates in the purchase order. With the iForm, you can really speed up and streamline that process of communication with your suppliers, and it eliminates any of the rekeying information that you need. But it's not only just limited to the purchasing side of the house. It also has some interaction with the sales side, and I will show you those as well real quickly. But the transactions that currently utilize the iForms are the created purchase order, a changed purchase order, supplier invoice clarification. If you're working on like a three-way match type process and you have some settings set up, I'll show you those as well, like where to initiate those, the sales quote, and then within a meeting activity, there's also an option in there that you can activate in business configuration called visit report. All right, so I'm going to show you just the setup overall, and we're going to jump right in and do a couple examples of the purchase order, because like I said, I find that this one that very underutilized, but has lots of benefit to it. So from a setup standpoint, super easy. The system comes with the interactive form already loaded for those 5 different, I'll say 5 different forms, but when we get to the supplier invoice exception area, there's lots of different interactive forms that are that come with those depending on the scenario of the exception. But on the supplier side, you can drive some automated kind of determination as to whether a particular supplier is going to get the output of an interactive form or not. So if you have, and it's kind of a combination of these 2 settings. So one, if you've got the purchase order acknowledgement set as expected in the supplier master record, that will indicate that you want some sort of response back from the supplier that they've received the purchase order, that they confirm the price, the quantity, the delivery dates, and things like that. And that just will change it changes the flag in the supply or in the purchase order when you kick it off of a different status as to whether purchase or an acknowledgement has been received or expected or not relevant. And we'll kind of walk through that when we get into the purchase order. And then in combination with the form template selection, now I'll just kind of bring over this just so I'm going to send out these slides so you can have them as a reference, but I'll show you really live in the system. So within the application and user management work center, there are all your form template little rules. So you've got within the form template selection, and we're going to do actually another Q&A cafe on output management in not next week, but I think the week after. So I'll go through this quickly, but we'll go into it more deeper in a different session. So I would select my created purchase order, and this is where you can drive different different output selections or form templates to be used by different groupings of customer suppliers driven from different companies or purchasing units or things like that. So if you want in your setup to have that interactive purchase order just to be sent using the suppliers that have that acknowledgement expected field filled in, you would just say interactive process true. And that indicates to the system that yes, only when that flag is flipped that you're going to send an interactive form. I like to show it in demos. So for me, I say everything free and clear, no matter what it is, always send an interactive form because I just like to have that option. But like I said, you can always change those however you see fit. And basically, if you haven't seen how this works, it basically works from least or most specific down to least specific. So it tries to find the rules that that match the requirements from the purchase order, the sales order, whatever, and then assigns it as it works down the list in the decision tree. All right. So that is just the overall the setup. I mean, it's super easy to configure. And then this is the exception, so we'll show that in a little bit. So let's pop in and kind of take a look at what we're going to get. So basically, I'm going to run through a few different examples just so you can see how the system interacts. So the process flow on a given purchase order, it'll take sort of 3 different segues depending on what the supplier says back to you. So you as the purchasing department will send the purchase order. One, very easy. The supplier says, yep, everything is A-okay, and you've got the delivery, the quantity, the pricing right, fine, perfect. They'll send that interactive form back as it's accepted, and then the PO acknowledgement will automatically flip to a PO acknowledged. So then your purchasing department doesn't have to sit there and chase down acknowledgements. They just have to manage upon exception for the things that they sent that they haven't received acknowledgement on. In the middle case, which probably most people have to deal with, is when there's any sort of discrepancy, either again, price, quantity, delivery date. So you send the PO out, the supplier will make some changes to the purchase order, and then there'll be the purchase order acknowledgement field in the purchase order OWL will say that there's a deviation. You can either accept it or reject it. So in this case, we're going to accept it. And then what'll happen is the supplier will receive those changes in another form. So they can just do that secondary check on it to say, okay, me as the buyer received your updates. I made the updates in the system, and here's the new updated purchase order. So all that stuff kind of happens really automated and very seamlessly with just a couple of clicks, as opposed to you, again, having to rekey in all that other information. And then the last option is just when they flat out can't do what you need them to do. So you'll send them a PO, the supplier will reject it, the acknowledgement will come back and says that it was rejected, and you basically will, you can accept it, or you can say, no, I don't accept your rejection. And then we go through the cycle again and maybe make some negotiations, but you can, if you accept it, then the PO will automatically cancel, and then they receive the cancellation notification. All right, so we'll walk through a couple of those examples. So let's start out first with the easiest of easies. And I'll just take a purchase order that I created today, and we'll just copy it for time's sake. So I'm sending my purchase order out to American Made Supply for 2 units, 2 cases of some dog food, and the delivery date on 5/20. You know, if you don't have the settings set up properly, you also have the opportunity, just by editing the output settings, to change the template form. So on a case-by-case basis, you can change it from the purchase order to the interactive form. And then obviously you're going to want to send it by email, and then who you're actually sending it to. Okay. So as soon as I order that, that output will come magically into my inbox in a second. And we will get that momentarily. So it's good when we're waiting for 2 seconds to get that. Otherwise, what I can do in here, so what you'll see in the status, again, based on that, based on those settings, you'll see that the system is saying that it's not yet acknowledged, but it's expecting one. No acknowledgement's been received, not delivered, things like that. Okay, and then so this is what our interactive form actually looks like. You'll see. Pop this guy open. So the places that the supplier needs to fill in on those purchase orders will be kind of highlighted in red here, so they can accept it, like I said, accept it with deviation or reject it. So simple case, we're gonna accept it. We're not gonna make any changes to the quantities, but you'll notice that you've got the acknowledged quantity, the price, everything else that's listed here, and then any sort of delivery dates. I mean, they can obviously put in their sales order number and any sort of comments that you'll actually see coming back on the acknowledgement. And what will then happen is once they submit it, they can click on that to do just an e-signature, so you have, you know, validation that they did accept it, or just do a submit. And what will happen is a new email will open up on their end that's automatically directed to this back-end email address. So if you guys are familiar potentially with like the service requests coming in through emails and things like that, this is essentially the same thing. It comes in through the back end and makes the updates where appropriate. And then all I need to do is send that guy. And I don't need to save it, but you can. And that will come through in just a second. And what will update in here, so this would say that the PO has, the acknowledgement's been received. And then this PO acknowledgement would change to acknowledged. Let's see. Come on, bad boy, let's go. And my email server has been doing a little bit of a delay today. But of course, as we're in a demo, that always happens, isn't it? The case. Well, anyway, so I mean, just here's an example as we're waiting for that to come through, that this will automatically kind of update. You'll see that that change from not yet acknowledged to acknowledgement received will be listed there, and then you can run different safe searches. So I've got different safe searches in here about where things purchase orders with acknowledgement required aren't there, not fully acknowledged, or if there's ones with deviations are going to be listed there as well. I'm not sure why that's not updating, but and then we can just kind of go forward. So let's do we'll do another example where we do have some sort of deviation, and then we can, if it doesn't come through, then we can just check this guy out. So we'll copy this one again. And we'll order that guy. And so we have got new PO 1119. That will come through in a second. And we'll go through sort of the same process, but we'll make the updates and the changes in the purchase order. So basically what the supplier would do they'd accept it with a deviation, and then they'll make any changes. They can say, okay, I accept this line item. So yep, I am gonna deliver it, but because of extra shipping or expedited shipping, I'm gonna charge you $25 for this. And then I can't really deliver both cases on the right day. I'm going to deliver one case on May 20th, and then I'll add a new line item in here for May 27th, and I'm going to deliver the balance of that purchase order. So they really can do a lot in here to maintain those the different dates. So getting out of that whole mentality of sending sending spreadsheets back and forth. Just a comment, and then let's hope for the best in this guy. All right, so we'll send that guy back. And then let's see if they came through yet. Ah, so lovely that nothing wants to work today when I was just doing this 2 minutes ago. All right. Let's kind of walk through it, imagining that this one was the acknowledged one. So, and what would happen in this scenario is that the acknowledgement would be received. You'd see the deviation in acknowledgement. Also, a task would get created for you. So then you'll see in here, check the deviating purchase order acknowledgement will pop up. And you can basically just go in and edit the details of this. So what you can see, you can accept or reject the deviations. When you pop into the actual task itself, you'll see what the ordered price is, the acknowledged price, the changes in the dates, if there's anything changing on the delivery date. So again, I ordered those 2 cases and they're gonna say, all right, the pricing is fine, but the delivery dates are wrong. You can reject that deviation. And then that will, again, send a new update back to the supplier, or we can just accept it. And then what will happen in our purchase order is I'll now see that line item split out into 2 different line items from a delivery standpoint. All right. So we'll pop into the items, and then we can see now that our 2 items in here have now been split out. So again, lots of automation in there to be able to do that. They'll also receive a changed PO as well. So you see, again, as I do make that update, they will receive that changed purchase order as well. So they're getting notification that you did make the updates on your side of the house, and that happens automatically. Let's see if anything came through yet on our side. Otherwise, nope, something does not want to work with us today, which is lovely. So then, I'm not going to go through it because obviously it's not working right now as to what happens when it's canceled, but the same sort of process would happen on our end, where the supplier then would click on the reject button with us and then do the signature, or they would sign it. It would come back and you would see that the order had been rejected. And then as soon as you accept that deviation, you'll see that it'll change the status to be canceled. All right. Yeah, I'm getting some errors in the background there. So that is more the purchasing side. The other thing to note on this, which is actually kind of sort of a hidden little gem again, as you're using it in more practical sense, if you've got a purchase order, you can actually at any point in time send an update out to the supplier and it'll resubmit this form to them, or if they have it on file, they can use this as an ongoing mechanism to keep the POs up to date. So it's not just a once and done with sort of communication that that you can use. You can use it for ongoing. So every time that, like, let's say a week down the road, we're getting closer to 527 and that other case of goods hasn't come in yet or hasn't shipped, they can then bump that date out using the interactive form, and it'll come back in, and it will then notify your purchasing department that you've got another deviation within that purchase order. So there's a lot of other value that you can use with it on like I said, on the ongoing basis of updating with your suppliers. I don't know if are we open to questions? Are there any questions? Yeah, are there any questions? I see one that says like form question, but I'm not sure if there was any other questions from the audience. Otherwise, we'll go and I'll show you. I will show you just overall the supplier invoicing, the exception side as well. So let's, for us, let's go in and actually do just an inbound delivery, so we have something to pay against for our supplier. I'll just do a quickie in here. So I'm not sure, again, from the audience of like who is actually using the three-way match and the exception management process within ByDesign, but it's a really kind of a nice tool to be able to send out any of your exceptions and trigger some automated actions in here. So let's go into just to show you the business configuration. And there's different options, and this again gets more into three-way match, but it also kind of indicates where and who would be the recipient of an interactive form, and then how things are actually treated. So there's all kinds of different rules on the three-way match side that can get set up for you to drive either a manual, sort of a manual routing of clarification or automatically. So you'll notice that I've got 7 different options in here that I can use to drive exception processing within the three-way match. And then you'll see, like, as an example, the possible duplicate. As I fill in my thresholds and things like that, that's all sort of standard. But then you'll notice down here, there's 2 options. And this is either things that are driven from that interactive form or through notifications that get driven through just directly through ByDesign. So in the possible duplicate, you'll see who the recipient is. So this one for possible duplicates out, that would go, if I had an automatic forwarding, it would read the supplier from the form and automatically send that interactive form out to them. The same thing happened with external information, but when I get down to things that potentially might have been either fat fingered or missed by someone internally, as I go through the different options, you can see goes to the requester or the recipient. And in the case of a missing receipt, maybe they didn't do a goods and services receipt. If there's a price variance, I can forward that to the buyer responsible, and they can trigger an issue. And I'll put this on the manual forwarding because we're going to go through the exception here. And then depending on how you want that sort of follow-up to happen, that can also, again, trigger different actions, either from if the variance is accepted by the user, the invoice is posted automatically, or if the variance is rejected, automatically voids the invoice. So you've got, again, the different options that will do some more automation in the background. Right. And so there's different forms, again, that are set up that are specific to each of these different exception types on the interactive form side, and you can drive through the form template selection, again, the same way that I showed you on the purchase order form. you can drive whether that's an interactive form or just more of a task-based thing if it's going to an internal party in the system. So let's go in and do our invoice. So we just received this guy, and we'll pop in and do a new invoice and force an exception on here. So we said we've got the price of $23. Maybe again, they wanted to add in and say, you know, nope, because we expedited the shipment, we're really going to charge you 25. And I put their item and the invoice date. And then as soon as I post that, I'm going to see that automated exception that happens. And I'll see why. So because I've I tried to post $25 for something that I acknowledged as $23, I'm going to get that exception. The task will automatically get generated. And then I can show the options. Obviously, this is more three-way match stuff, but depending on how those are set up, you'll have the option here. So I had it saved to for any sort of price variance, save the document and forward for clarification manually as opposed to automatically to the buyer responsible. So basically, I want to send that out to the supplier, and so that'll automatically fill in the supplier ID. And so, like, please check line 1. And then they'll receive that same type of form in the background. It's good things are actually coming through one side, but not the other. Okay, let's see. All right, come on, open up. So this is what the clarification request will look like. So your invoice shows a price variance compared to the purchase order. So it's gonna fill in all that stuff for you automatically. And then it will give you that option. So answer if the credit memo is attached or correction invoice is attached, the price was agreed upon by you or others, see my comment. And then they can put their different comments in there. And we can do our signature. Maybe that'll do something to get it right. And we can submit that. And then we can submit that back into the system. So because it's, you know, we don't want the supplier can't post anything on our behalf. It will just send back different requests, different clarifications, acknowledgements back into the system. So basically I can see from the invoicing side, since it's still an exception, if I go into the invoices, I can set up and see all the invoices that are sitting within an exception. And then there's an option in here that has like when something is pending. So you've received something back from the supplier that they've actually done something with it. We can go back into the exceptions. And within the exceptions, there's an action log in here, and that will indicate here everything that came back to the supplier, so we can see exactly what they responded back. So here's the response that was received back from the supplier, so I can open up that that form. It's a new one. And we can see that the price was agreed upon by you and their comments that were listed there. So again, a little bit more automation rather than sending emails out. Now you have written proof automatically given back to you and appended into the original document when there are issues or discrepancies or exceptions within the chain, within the process. So it is just a nice little feature for when there's a lot of people potentially in your pool of resources doing either AP, AR, or whatever, to be able to see if there's if there's an issue. Okay. Right. So that is more the supplier side. Any questions on just those two different areas to the purchase order side? Just for my thoughts, I want to see if these actually came through. Yay, they did come through. I knew it was going to work at some point in time. So yeah, just going back to that purchase order again, you see that you've got your acknowledgement, and then within the acknowledgement that we received, that was more the deviation. You can view this as well. In some cases, when there are changes to the different items in here, quantity, value, the system will highlight to you exactly what's being changed in that particular document. They can also append attachments as well if they've got anything on there, and then you can see sort of their form and what came back from them as well. So we again are keeping track of any of the information that they sent us. So you do get a chance to see that that happen. And then when we go back, you can also see again your different areas in here. So purchase orders, you know, that do have different acknowledgements, different deviations. We can look, and there's tasks that also get generated in here, so you can see your open tasks, anything that that flows into that option. You also have that ability to pop directly into here, and this is where you can actually see that I've got that ordered price, the acknowledged price, and then any of, again, the delivery schedule. And from here, it's real easy just to either reject it. I can change that PO acknowledgement. Maybe I want to say, okay, so I'm going to accept the deviation. Like, this is a great example. Okay, I want 2 cases, but they're going to deliver me 1 and 1. Well, that doesn't make sense because I'm going to pay shipping twice. So rather than accepting it, I'm going to change that PO acknowledgement to either reject it, or I can change it to say, okay, I'm only going to accept both cases on the 27th, and then they'll get that changed PO in the background that they can then reconfirm that they're going to accept the fact that we're combining those 2 line items. So as soon as I accept that, my task will pop off my list in the bottom here. So that pops off, and then when I go back into my purchase orders, we'll see that that's been acknowledged. Okay. Right, I don't see any questions from anyone. So I will pop into more of the sales side, and this will be sort of a real quick, because one side I feel, again, doing this and knowing how things work, I think the sales quote side has some definite value in being able to communicate with your customers and getting acceptance on quotes and things like that, or updating and making changes. The visit report, even though it's there, I think it's a little bit, it needs a little bit of honing, because there's not really the same sort of automation that that you have in the purchasing side. So let's go in and we'll just create a sales quote. And we'll just use our good old friend Silver Star. Since we're buying lots of dog food today, we'll order some beef dog food. We've got 2 cases. And we can submit this guy. And so you'll see again also, this one works a little bit differently from the selection criteria of the template. You can do that through the form template selection options, like I showed before with the purchase order. However, you can actually drive directly the sales interactive quote from the supplier itself. So I'll just pop into to Silver Star, and you can see where that gets set up. And if I'm in the account master, and we're in the communication tab. Again, we're going to have a nice long session on output management in the coming weeks. So we'll get into more detail, but I can select the different options. So my sales quote, and here you've got your different templates that are available, and you'll notice that the interactive form is one of those forms. So it works, like I said, a little bit differently than the supplier setup, but I think it's a little bit easier when you can just drive it directly from the customer if you forget. So let's go ahead and submit our quote. And we've done a lot today. There definitely is a very long delay. So I'm in the incoming back in from the quote side. So what I'm going to do is just show you something that I kind of Betty Crockered up for you. But just to show you the options and what's in here, and these forms can be modified using the Adobe Lifecycle Designer. You don't have the option to use the Easy Form Editor to make changes and updates to these guys. So if you do want to make any changes or updates, don't hesitate to let us know. But what this, again, the customer has the option in here to edit or remove an item or add a new item, or they can edit the price. Like if it's not what they actually wanted, they want to get it for 27 bucks and not 29.99. They can make those changes and adjustments in here and then submit it back in. So it works through the same sort of workflow from the send and fill in option. What happens then in the background is that whoever the responsible party is, the employee responsible on that quote would receive a task. And the tasks actually come in through your open items within the system. So you'll see all of your things that were changed. So anything, the sales quote that had been changed by the customer, and anything that's new, you know, they'll show you that's new or in process. That one actually came out really quickly, which I just did, I think. And so you see your sales quote's been updated by the customer. And what we would do is actually just show the details of this task. So you'll see that it was changed. If there's any notes in there, the attachment will come back in. So this then gets appended to that particular task, and you can see where they made their changes. Technology, there we go. So that'll pop up, and then you can actually see that from line 10 that they made those changes and updates. Now you as the salesperson would then have an option in here, like when that form pops up. Let me see why this isn't opening up. Let's try it one more time, because the form kind of takes on a different format. Because they'll have an option in there once that. Let me close this guy. Let's just close these guys down. Now let's try to open it and see what happens. Nope, does not want to. Oh, there we go. Yay. So you'll get this back, and then as the person responsible, rather than having that interactive, the email back and forth and things like that, you can just say update quote. So that will then trigger off another workflow that'll update the quote in the background for your supplier, and then resend out that quote back to the customer. So again, a little more automation on that end of the spectrum. If you're doing just pretty simple quotes within ByDesign to be able to make updates based on the changes that the customer was requesting. All right. And let's see if that came back in if I made those changes and they popped back in again. So yeah, so again, you can now see that that original purchase order that was coming out for $29.99 each is now going down to that $27 per each. So it's that updated, again, updated automatically for me. Right. And then just real quick, the last piece is just showing the appointment tasks. So only the appointment task has this option, and this has to be activated in business configuration. It's under account and activity management. It's either under there or general business data. I can't remember off the top of my head. But there's the appointment, and then you'll see this button that pops up once you do configure it that just adds this visit report. Like I said, I don't use this at all, because I think even though it creates that PDF, and the PDF is, for all intents and purposes, it's an interactive form. There's not that end submit button in the end to be able to update the activity with notes or things like that. In practicality, I would want to have that sitting on my laptop as I'm going into my customer, and then, you know, if I'm offline or if I'm just be able to fill that in, and then it updates the activity task when I'm online again. But it is there if you wanted sort of a more formal, you know, a more formal way to use those, or to capture data from the customer site, or again, take something offline with you and then attach it back after the meeting was over onto the meeting activity task. All right. So I think I went through the five different options today for our iForms. I've got the configuration, how we do the exceptions. You've got your setup that's sitting in here. We went through the forms of the create, the change, the invoice clarification, showed you the quick workflow on the quote, and then our friend, the meeting visit report. And if anyone has any questions, or if you want to email me directly, if you want to play around with this and you have trouble setting it up or getting things activated, you can always reach out to me at laura.hercolo@vistaview.com. So just my name, laura.hercolo, and then, you know, everybody is at vistaviewsolutions.com. Don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I went ahead and looked at when we have that output management session, and it's on June 10th. So it's coming up.
Perfect.
Yeah, and if you wanted to register for that right now, you can go to our resources page on our website, vistaviewsolutions.com, scroll all the way to the bottom, and then that's where our little GoToWebinar registration table is. So please use that. Great. So that's everything. Then thank you so much, Laura, and have a great rest of your Wednesday, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everyone.